She married him for his money, slept with his brother behind his back, then helped put him in the ground. But what if I told you that wasn't even the darkest part of the story? What started as a love triangle turned into something far more sinister, something global, calculated, and still unfolding. A husband murdered, a brother framed, a fortune missing, and a woman who never stopped controlling it all, even from behind bars. This is the story of Isabelle Monroe Hale, the Black Widow of Savannah. October rain clung to the windows of the Hale estate like a warning nobody noticed. Inside that grand home, Isabelle Monroe Hale, 26, lived a life most envied. Married to Richard Hale, a charming real estate mogul worth over $12 million. But behind closed doors, it wasn't love. It was survival. And secrets. Big ones. Everyone knew Isabelle's uncle, Charles Monroe, a retired Army colonel turned gun range owner. Stern, loyal, protective to a fault, and very vocal about how much he hated Richard J. "Man's a snake in a suit," he once said at a family barbecue, loud enough for neighbors to hear. "He'll hurt her. Watch." When Richard was found murdered, Charles was the first name on everyone's lips. And Charles didn't make it easy. He refused to talk to police, owned multiple firearms, and had no alibi the night Richard died. But the truth was messier than that. Richard's body was found locked in the trunk of his own BMW, hidden inside the garage for 3 days. His skull caved in, his wedding ring missing. Isabelle claimed he left for a business trip, but his assistant confirmed Richard never made the flight. The murder weapon? A fireplace poker from the guest house, where Damien Hale, Richard's younger brother, was staying. Police followed the obvious trail: motive, threats, military background. All roads pointed to Charles Monroe. And when they searched his property, they found a bloody watch, broken glass, and a set of Richard's cufflinks in a fire pit. They arrested him that night. Isabelle cried in court. "He always hated Richard," she sobbed. Maybe he finally snapped. The public believed it. For a while, but then something broke the case wide open. Lila Bennett, the housekeeper, came forward. Said something felt off. Richard had secretly installed a motion-activated camera in the guest house hallway. Damien and Isabelle, kissing, sneaking in and out, laughing in Richard's bed. But that wasn't the worst part. At 2:43 a.m., the night of the murder, the camera caught Damien exiting the main house, wearing gloves, sweat-soaked shirt, blood on his collar. And at 3:02 a.m., Isabelle entered the guest house. Calm, clean. She kissed him on the forehead and whispered, "It's done." Turns out, Charles Monroe had found out about the affair weeks earlier. He'd confronted Isabelle in private, called her a disgrace, told her to leave Richard before she destroyed him. So Charles started following her, snooping, trying to protect Richard without causing a scandal. That's how the cufflinks ended up at his place. He found them in Damien's guest house and planned to confront him. But when Richard ended up dead, he panicked and burned them. Faced with undeniable video evidence, Damien cracked. Confessed everything in a 17-page written statement. Isabelle seduced him back in Miami. She targeted Richard for his wealth. They planned the murder once they realized there was no prenup. Isabelle convinced him it was the only way they could finally be free. But when he handed her the signed confession in the interrogation room, she laughed. "You'll rot in prison. I'll be rich and gone." She stood up, until the detective walked in. "You're not going anywhere, Isabelle. We've got your search history, burner texts, and now your voice on the hallway cam." Charles Monroe was cleared. The state dropped all charges with a formal apology. But the damage to his name and health was irreversible. Isabelle Monroe was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, and obstruction. Life without parole. Damien Hale got 35 years after turning state's witness. He wept when the sentence was read. The Hale fortune? Tied up in probate. Isabelle inherited nothing. 2 years later, a young woman visited Charles Monroe at his modest home outside Savannah. She handed him a small envelope. Inside, a flash drive. On it, a final voicemail Richard had left on the night he died. "Hey Charles, I think you were right about Isabelle. Something's off. If anything happens to me, don't let her take the house. Or the company. Or my name." Charles listened in silence, then deleted it. Too late, Richard. 2 years into her life sentence at Pulaski State Prison, Isabelle Monroe Hale was a model inmate, calm, quiet, unnervingly poised. She spent hours in the library, wrote letters, never complained. Her behavior wasn't just good. It was strategic, because Isabelle wasn't done. At Pulaski State Prison, Isabelle Monroe Hale had become a ghost in silk gloves, smooth, unreadable, and always 10 steps ahead. Guards liked her. Inmates respected her. Even the warden once said, "She's not a killer. She's a lady who lost her way." She read books like weapons manuals, highlighting, annotating, cataloging patterns of betrayal and survival. She'd been writing letters to lawyers, former investors, even old friends of Richard's, manipulating sympathy, hinting at injustice. One appeal had already made it to the Georgia Supreme Court. And then she got her hands on a laptop, supposedly for a GED course. What the prison didn't realize was that she had memorized her late husband's old login credentials. Because Richard Hale hadn't just built real estate deals. He had built access, offshore accounts, dummy corporations, crypto, and she knew where to look. By the time anyone noticed, over $400,000 had vanished from a dormant company Richard once owned, routed through a Bermuda shell, transferred to a Payoneer account under the name Belmara, a name Isabelle had used once on a trip to Cabo. The prison locked everything down. They interrogated staff, shut down tech privileges, but they couldn't prove the theft came from inside. And Isabelle? She kept her head down, smiled, played the role, but someone else wasn't smiling. Charles Monroe. He'd kept his own kind of silence since the trial. No interviews, no lawsuits, no memoirs. Just a quiet life in a small cabin with a breathing machine and a deep scar where his trust used to be. But when the DA's office quietly contacted him, told him Isabelle was being moved to a lower security facility after good behavior, something in him snapped. "This ends with her. Or it never ends," he said. He reached out to a name he hadn't spoken in years, Agent Klein, retired FBI, a friend from his Army days. They met in the back of a church in Macon. Charles laid it all out, his theory, Isabelle's movements, the offshore theft. Klein agreed. Isabelle was running something, and it had to stop. Weeks later, during transport to the new facility, Isabelle sat cuffed in the back of a van, eyes on the Georgia pines flashing past. Across from her sat another inmate. Young, nervous, talkative. "You really the one they call the Black Widow?" Isabelle just smiled. "Names don't matter. Only leverage does." The woman didn't know it, but she was bait, planted by Klein. Wearing a wire, Isabelle bragged. Not stupidly, but enough. Mentioned accounts, escape plans, foreign contacts. "I'm not dying in a cage," she said softly. "The world's still mine. They just haven't figured it out yet." She never made it to the new facility. That van took a detour. Minor route change. Approved on paper. But somewhere past Fort Valley, it crashed. A blown tire, the official report said. Flipped twice. Landed in a ditch. Caught fire. The guards made it out. The other inmate crawled free. Isabelle didn't. Her body was found pinned in the wreck, partially burned. A single cuff still attached to her wrist like a final mockery of control. The coroner's report was inconclusive, but the fire had erased most doubts. The news didn't make headlines. Just a paragraph in the Savannah Journal under Corrections Van Crash Claims 1. Charles Monroe didn't read the article. He already knew. Instead, he visited Richard's grave that morning, laid a single white magnolia on the headstone, then sat down, the wind brushing his coat. "Turns out you were right too," he said aloud. And for the first time in years, he exhaled. Because some stories don't end with redemption. Some end the way they deserve, quietly, irrevocably, and with the last lie buried right beside the body.